Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are delighted to share with you different stories about love and betrayal from around the world. So let's begin today's journey of stories. All my girlfriend's husbands are successful, except for you. You're just a waste in my family's eyes. I stopped seeing you as my husband long ago. Gideon's fingers gripped his phone tightly, his knuckles turning white from the pressure. His gaze was fixed on the message his wife Leandra had just sent in the family WhatsApp group. Above that message was an elegant birthday party invitation, inviting all family members to her 30th birthday dinner at the Crown and Rose Bar. But immediately following was a warning specifically aimed at him. Gideon, please do not show up. A deathly silence fell over the group chat. After a few seconds, a relative sent an awkward emoji, while most chose to remain silent. Gideon could feel blood pounding in his ears, a chill climbing from his spine to his brain. He stood outside their apartment building in East London, looking up at the home they had shared for 5 years. The window was lit, the curtains slightly open, and he could see Leandra's silhouette moving around the room. Gideon didn't send any messages, nor did he go upstairs to confront her. He simply put his phone back in his pocket, turned away, and disappeared into the damp, cold streets of East London. It was the last day of February 2023, as London welcomed its coldest week of the year. Gideon was 32, once a skilled welder, now a middle-aged man unemployed for 2 years. Leandra was 29, an administrative assistant at a medium-sized advertising company, once considered a beauty in the community. Their marriage, like this old apartment on the edge of East London, appeared intact on the surface but was rotting inside. "I thought we could communicate one more time," Gideon muttered to himself, his voice scattered by the cold wind. It was only at this moment that he truly realized their 7-year relationship had reached its end. 7 years ago, Gideon met Leandra. At that time, he was a senior welder at a heavy industry factory, with a stable income and aspirations for the future. Leandra was a young woman fresh out of university, beautiful, vibrant, and carrying a hint of pride. Their first meeting wasn't romantic, just a chance encounter at a community coffee shop. But Gideon's steady character and sincere attitude touched Leandra. In that hopeful era, they quickly fell in love and married 2 years later. But fate is never smooth sailing. The factory's closure was the beginning of a nightmare. With the decline of British manufacturing, Gideon's factory suddenly declared bankruptcy 2 years ago. This was a massive blow to Gideon. His skills were too specialized, and emerging industries didn't require these skills. "Gideon, why don't you learn new skills?" Leandra questioned him on countless nights, the patience in her eyes gradually replaced by disappointment. "Look at Ginny's husband. He switched to finance and now makes 6 figures. How much longer do we have to live in this rundown apartment?" "I'm trying," Gideon would answer calmly. "I've enrolled in a retraining program. These things take time." But Leandra's patience was wearing thin. Sweet words once spoken had turned into sarcasm and mockery. Romantic dinners became silent face-offs. Gideon struggled to find odd jobs at construction sites and repair shops to maintain some income, but the cost of living in the East End made it difficult to make ends meet. Leandra's disappointment in him deepened day by day, and she began frequenting various social events, claiming it was to expand her network. The turning point came 3 months earlier when Leandra met Dominic at a newly opened bar. Dominic was the leader of a small gang in the area, running several bars and underground casinos. He was burly, sharp-eyed, and his demeanor revealed a dangerous charm that Gideon lacked. More importantly, he possessed what Leandra increasingly craved: money, power, and social status, even if they were built on the foundations of the underworld. "Dominic is a real man," Leandra told her girlfriends. "Ambitious, powerful, knows how to make a woman feel valued. Not like Gideon, who only complains about not finding work all day." Initially, Gideon hadn't noticed his wife's changes. Until one evening, he accidentally saw a message on Leandra's phone. "Missing you tonight, my queen. See you at our usual place tomorrow." The message was from work partner D. Gideon's heart sank, but he didn't immediately confront Leandra. He began to notice more details: Leandra's newly purchased designer perfume, her delayed return times, and her increasingly obvious coldness toward him. When he gently tried to ask if Leandra had something on her mind, he was rudely interrupted. "My problem is that I married a man like you," Leandra scoffed. Look at where we live. Look at my life. Where are all those beautiful futures you promised me? What pained Gideon even more was the change in attitude from Leandra's brother, Ellis. Ellis once respected Gideon, seeing him as a role model. However, lately, Ellis had become distant, his eyes revealing a strange mixture of sympathy and contempt. Gideon later learned that Ellis owed Dominic a gambling debt and was now doing odd jobs at Dominic's establishments to pay it off. Worse still, Ellis seemed to have become a cover for Dominic and Leandra's meetings. Many times, Leandra told Gideon she was visiting her brother when she was actually with Dominic. Man, Leandra and Dominic are getting very close. Ellis told Gideon one day after a chance meeting at a bar, under the influence of alcohol. I shouldn't be saying this, but maybe you should talk to her. When Gideon tried to discuss this with Leandra, she erupted with unprecedented fury. You're spying on me? Leandra demanded, her eyes flashing with unease and anger. What right do you have? At least Dominic is a capable man, unlike you, dreaming all day about jobs that won't come back. At that moment, Gideon realized their marriage had long been dead in all but name. But he hadn't expected Leandra to choose such a cruel way to humiliate him. The day after the WhatsApp group message incident, Leandra moved out of their apartment, telling Gideon face to face that she was starting a new life with Dominic. I gave you chances, Gideon, she said as she packed, but you chose to stand still. I can't wait anymore. Gideon didn't argue, just silently watched as she packed her belongings one by one. He noticed that Leandra wasn't just taking her clothes and personal items, but also most of the valuable gifts they'd received at their wedding, even including a pair of silver candlesticks his parents had left him. Those were my parents' heirlooms. Gideon pointed to the silver candlesticks. Leandra didn't even look up. Severance fee. You owe me far more than this. That night, Gideon sat alone in the half-empty apartment, finishing the last bottle of beer in the refrigerator. His phone kept vibrating with messages from concerned relatives and friends, but he didn't reply to any. As the last drop of alcohol slid down his throat, he made a decision. The next day, Gideon moved out of that apartment filled with memories and rented a small room in a more remote area. He cut off contact with most friends and relatives, keeping only necessary work relationships. He began a new life. During the day, he continued looking for work and attending skills training. At night, he was alone, chewing on the bitterness of betrayal. Meanwhile, Leandra quickly immersed herself in Dominic's world. She moved into Dominic's apartment in a more prosperous area and began what she thought would be a glamorous new life. She posted carefully crafted photos on social media, high-end restaurants, designer clothes, brand-name handbags, and intimate photos of her and Dominic at various occasions. Each photo seemed to proclaim to the world she had finally gotten everything she wanted. See this? She wrote in the caption of one photo. This is the life I deserve. In the picture, she wore an evening gown worth thousands of pounds, standing on the terrace of a high-end London hotel, with Dominic in a suit beside her, the Thames night view in the background. Life's turning point came on a rainy night 1 month after Gideon moved. On his way home, he passed an unassuming boxing gym, and the sounds coming from inside caught his attention. Out of curiosity, or perhaps to escape the sudden downpour, he walked in. Soren was the owner of the gym, a retired professional boxer. Seeing Gideon soaked through, Soren handed him a towel. How can I help you, young man? Soren asked, his keen gaze examining Gideon. Despite being nearly 60, Soren was still powerfully built, with an alertness and judgment in his eyes characteristic of professional boxers. Gideon looked around at the young people sweating in the boxing ring and suddenly felt a strange impulse. I want to learn boxing, Gideon said. Not for competition, just need to release some things. Soren noted Gideon's physique and the determination in his eyes and nodded. 3 classes a week, first one's free. If you're serious, I can teach you the real stuff. And so Gideon began his boxing training. The first few weeks were extremely painful. After each session, his body ached all over. But this physical pain somehow eased his emotional pain. More importantly, Gideon discovered he had a talent for fighting. His body coordination was excellent, his reaction speed astonishing, and he could take a hit. Did you box when you were younger? Soren asked curiously after a training session. Amateur matches, just a few. Gideon replied. Gave it up later for work and marriage. Soren clapped Gideon heavily on the shoulder. Wasted potential. But it's not too late to remedy that. You have a quality many people don't. You can endure pain and learn from it. 3 months passed quickly, and Gideon had become one of the gym's best. His body became stronger, his mind more focused. On the work front, he found a job as a welding technical consultant through a training program. Though the salary wasn't high, it was much more stable than his previous temporary jobs. You should consider entering some competitions, Soren said to Gideon one day. Not necessarily professional ones. You could start with amateur leagues. Gideon thought for a moment. Are there more direct fights? The kind with higher returns. Soren gave Gideon a meaningful look. There are, but that's not the regular route. High risk, high reward. Requires an iron will and nerves of steel. Gideon didn't hesitate. I want to try. And so Gideon stepped into the world of underground boxing. His first match was held in an abandoned warehouse against an opponent 20 pounds heavier and far more experienced. The venue was crude, and the audience consisted mostly of underground thugs, gamblers, and wealthy thrill seekers. Gideon took quite a beating, but his willpower surprised everyone present. Eventually, he knocked out his opponent with a precise uppercut, winning the match and a substantial prize. Silent Gideon. That's what the audience nicknamed him, because throughout the entire fight he barely uttered a word, just silently endured the pain and then struck decisively. As victories accumulated, Gideon's reputation gradually spread in the underground boxing scene. His characteristics were silence, tenacity, and deadly precision. He never showed off or provoked his opponents, but always found the opportunity for a lethal strike at the crucial moment. His prize money also increased, soon exceeding his regular job income. During this time, Gideon met some figures from the underground world through Soren. Some were legitimate business owners, others operated on the edge of the law. Gideon never judged them, just maintained a polite distance while learning the rules of this world. Meanwhile, Leandra's life wasn't as beautiful as she had imagined. Behind Dominic's charm lurked brutality and a need for control. He liked Leandra's beauty but treated her more as a decoration and trophy. In public, he was attentive to Leandra. In private, he gradually revealed his true face. Irritable, suspicious, and extremely controlling. Who do you think you are? Dominic sneered when Leandra complained about his rough behavior. Without me, what are you? A pitiful wretch abandoned by your useless husband? You should thank me for giving you this life. Initially, Leandra tried to resist, but each attempt ended with Dominic's threats and intimidation. Gradually, she began to understand her situation. She wasn't Dominic's partner, but his property. Her once prized beauty and charm were now just tools for Dominic to show off. What suffocated Leandra even more was that Dominic began to restrict her social circle, monitoring her phone and social media. Her friends were gradually filtered by Dominic, leaving only those he approved of. Her financial freedom was also limited. Nominally living in luxury, she actually needed to ask Dominic's permission even to buy a piece of clothing. At least Gideon never treated me like this. One day Leandra said to herself in the mirror, immediately shocked and ashamed by the thought. A year can change many things. For Gideon, this year was one of complete transformation. Success in underground boxing gave him not just money, but confidence and connections. He began to understand that the rules of this world were more complex than he had imagined. Under Soren's guidance, he invested his first pot of gold in a small metal processing factory producing high-precision industrial components. Thanks to his professional knowledge of welding and metal processing, the factory quickly gained some stable clients. This is real investment, Soren told Gideon. Boxing can earn quick money, but you need a legitimate foundation. Gideon also began building his own team and network. He hired some technical workers with experiences similar to his own, offering better conditions than the market. This included Leandra's brother Ellis. Ellis was initially surprised and suspicious of Gideon's invitation. Why me? He asked. After what Leandra did to you. Because you have skills, and I know your character, Gideon replied. As for Leandra, that's another matter. In fact, Gideon learned a lot about Dominic through Ellis. Dominic's business appeared glamorous, but was actually fraught with problems. His gang was only a second-tier player in the underworld, often squeezed by larger forces. His bar business was running at a loss due to mismanagement, and his casinos faced close monitoring from the police. The biggest problem was that Dominic's ambition exceeded his ability, and he often offended people he shouldn't. Gideon maintained a calm interest in this information but never actively intervened. He focused on developing his own business, gradually expanding the factory's scale, and beginning to venture into some legal businesses related to construction and heavy industry. At the same time, Gideon's position in the underground boxing arena became increasingly secure. He began to challenge some top underground boxers, winning more often than losing. His fighting style also matured, no longer just hard-hitting, but combining technique and strategy, often finding weakness at the most unexpected moments. "You're no longer boxing just to vent," Soren told Gideon after a training session. "You're beginning to truly understand the essence of this sport." Gideon smiled slightly. "Maybe I've found a new goal." This goal wasn't just to win matches, but to rebuild his dignity and strength. Each victory, each new business deal, was a denial of the waste he once was. By summer a year later, Gideon had successfully built himself into a businessman of some renown with a double identity as an underground boxer. He moved out of the small room and purchased an apartment in a better area of East London. On the surface, he was a successful small business owner. Underneath, he also had some influence in the underground world. Meanwhile, Leandra's life was getting worse. Dominic's business problems were increasingly serious, and his temper was becoming more violent. Multiple times, he inflicted physical violence on Leandra while drunk, then apologized with expensive gifts when sober. Leandra had tried to leave, but Dominic clearly warned her that if she dared to leave, she would face more serious consequences. "Where do you think you can go?" Dominic sneered. "Back to that useless husband? He's forgotten you long ago. You're my woman now, forever." Leandra felt trapped in a carefully designed cage. She had lost her job. Dominic insisted she didn't need to work, lost most of her friends. Dominic thought they were bad influences, and even lost normal contact with her family. Dominic monitored all her communications. The only family member she could contact regularly was Ellis, and that was only because Ellis now worked for one of Dominic's partners. "Are you okay?" Ellis asked with concern during a rare moment alone with his sister. Leandra forced a smile. "Of course, everything's fine. Dominic treats me well." But Ellis saw the bruises under her long sleeves and noticed the fear in her eyes. He didn't expose her lie, just gently squeezed her hand. "If you need help, tell me anytime." What Leandra didn't know was that Ellis had been reporting her situation to Gideon. Initially, Gideon appeared indifferent, but as Dominic's violent behavior escalated, Gideon began to pay more attention to this information. "It's not for her," Gideon told Ellis, "but no one should be treated that way." The turning point occurred at Dominic's birthday party. It was a grand celebration held at his most luxurious bar, gathering all his subordinates and friends. Ellis, as one of Dominic's minions, was also invited and allowed to bring a friend. "I'd like to bring my boss," Ellis told Dominic. "He's interested in expanding the bar business." Dominic, always open to new business opportunities, agreed to this request, completely unaware that Ellis's boss was Gideon. On the night of the party, when Gideon walked into the bar, the air seemed to freeze. Leandra, standing beside Dominic, suddenly turned pale. Dominic, who had never met Gideon, immediately realized something from Leandra's reaction. "You're the husband who got dumped?" Dominic asked loudly, trying to humiliate Gideon in front of everyone. "Brave of you to show up here." Gideon calmly looked at Dominic, then at Leandra. He noticed the carefully concealed bruises on her face and the fear in her eyes. The anger from a year ago ignited again in his heart, but this time, it was colder, more focused. "I'm just here to talk business," Gideon said calmly. "But it seems tonight isn't the right time." He turned to leave, but was stopped by Dominic's words. "Wait, silent Gideon, right? The underground boxer." Dominic's tone suddenly changed. "I've heard of you. Didn't expect Leandra's ex-husband to be an underground boxer. Interesting." Gideon turned around, looking at Dominic expressionlessly. "Perhaps we can arrange a special match," Dominic proposed, his eyes glinting dangerously. "I have some friends who would be very interested." Gideon knew it was a trap, but he also saw an opportunity. "Perhaps," he replied briefly, then left the bar. In the following weeks, Gideon began more actively collecting intelligence about Dominic. He learned that Dominic's empire was on the verge of collapse. He owed loan sharks, had conflicts with several larger gangs, and the police were closely monitoring his activities. "He can't hold on much longer," Ellis told Gideon. "He's becoming more violent, especially toward Leandra. I'm worried he might do something extreme." Gideon decided it was time to take action. He wasn't doing it for Leandra. At least that's what he told himself. But because Dominic had become a threat, not just to Leandra, but to Ellis and other innocent people. Gideon's plan was precise and cold. First, through his underground contacts, he ensured that Dominic's loan sharks tightened their repayment deadlines. Then, he anonymously provided the police with information about some of Dominic's illegal activities, resulting in raids on several of his important venues. Finally, through underground boxing channels, he accepted this special match Dominic had proposed. "It's a trap," Soren warned Gideon. "He won't play by the rules." "I know," Gideon replied. "But sometimes you have to walk into a trap to lure out the prey." The match was set in an abandoned warehouse controlled by Dominic. On the surface, it was a high-stakes private boxing match. In reality, it was a revenge plan designed by Dominic. He arranged a professional boxer much stronger than Gideon as his opponent and ensured that the referee and rules were unfavorable to Gideon. On the night of the match, the warehouse gathered many spectators, mostly Dominic's subordinates and some underground figures. Leandra was also forcibly brought to the scene. Dominic wanted her to witness her ex-husband's defeat firsthand. "Watch carefully," Dominic told Leandra. "See what a real man is." When Gideon walked into the warehouse, he immediately sensed the dangerous atmosphere. But his expression remained calm, as if everything was under control. As the match began, Gideon's opponent indeed used various illegal means as Soren had warned. Gideon took many heavy blows, but he persisted, looking for his moment. In the third round, when his opponent exposed a weakness due to overconfidence, Gideon seized the opportunity and knocked him down with a precise combination punch. The warehouse fell silent, then erupted into deafening cheers. At that moment, Gideon looked at Dominic, whose expression changed from shock to anger. Just as Dominic was about to order his men to move in, the warehouse doors were suddenly burst open. A squad of fully armed police rushed in, shouting for everyone to freeze. It turned out that before the match, Gideon had anonymously provided the police with information about this illegal boxing match, as well as evidence of multiple crimes Dominic was suspected of. In the chaos, Dominic tried to escape, but was intercepted by Gideon. The two briefly fought in a corner of the warehouse, with Gideon quickly gaining the upper hand thanks to his professional fighting skills. "This is for everyone you've hurt," Gideon said calmly, then delivered a heavy punch that knocked Dominic to the ground. As the police took Dominic away, Leandra stood nearby, shocked by it all. Her eyes were complex, mixed with fear, relief, and a hint of awe for Gideon. "Gideon, she tried to speak. Gideon looked at her once, his eyes showing neither anger nor pity, just a calm detachment. "Take care of yourself, Leandra," he said briefly, then turned and left. In the months that followed, Dominic was sentenced to prison for multiple charges. His empire completely collapsed. His subordinates were either arrested or disbanded. Leandra, having lost her support and status, had to rebuild her life from scratch. She found a job at a clothing store, rented a small apartment, and began living an ordinary life. One day, Leandra mustered the courage to wait for Gideon outside his company. When Gideon came out, she stepped forward to stop him. "Gideon, I know I don't deserve it, but I need to talk to you," she said, tears in her eyes. "I made a terrible mistake. I still have feelings. I'm willing to do anything to make amends." Gideon looked at this woman he once deeply loved, feeling a complex emotion. But then, he remembered that WhatsApp message, remembered her coldness when she moved out, remembered how she pretended to be happy by Dominic's side, even though it was a lie. "Leandra," Gideon said calmly, "some hurts, once inflicted, can never be repaired. I wish you well, but what was between us is over." Leandra left in tears, finally understanding that some choices carry irreversible consequences. She eventually moved to Manchester, where she began a new life. Occasionally, she would receive messages from Ellis, learning about Gideon's situation. His company was growing, his reputation in the community was improving, and he had even begun funding projects to help retrain unemployed workers. But Leandra knew she would never be part of Gideon's life again. The man who once quietly loved her had now become a completely new person, strong, confident, no longer needing anyone's approval or love. Gideon continued to develop his business, expanding the welding factory into a professional metal processing company with dozens of employees and a stable client base. He quit underground boxing, but maintained his habit of training at the gym. Soren remained one of his few friends, often sharing a beer and life experiences after training. One day, after completing a high-intensity training session, Soren asked Gideon if he regretted his decision about Leandra. "I don't hate her," Gideon replied after a moment's thought. "I just don't love her anymore. Some things, once broken, cannot be restored." Soren nodded, understandingly patting Gideon's shoulder. "That's life, young man. Sometimes what we lose leads us to find something more important." Gideon looked out the window, London's East End skyline faintly visible in the twilight. In the past 2 years, he had lost a marriage but found his own strength and value. The waste, publicly humiliated by his wife in the family group chat, no longer existed. In his place stood a strong, independent man who had rebuilt his life with his own hands and willpower. As for Leandra, although she now lived a peaceful life, she forever lived with the regret brought by her choices. She often dreamed of those ordinary but warm days spent with Gideon, then woke up in pain, realizing that it was all forever lost. Her new life appeared calm on the surface, but inside, she carried a wound that could never heal, a wound she had caused herself and could never repair. As for Dominic, he quickly lost his former prestige in prison. Without the protection of money and power, he was just an ordinary criminal among many, often bullied by other inmates. His once proud strength and charm became worthless behind high walls. One day, when Dominic was surrounded by several inmates in the prison yard, he suddenly saw a familiar figure standing in the distance, Gideon. It turned out that Gideon was volunteering for a prisoner vocational training program. Their gazes met in the air. What Dominic saw in Gideon's calm eyes was not hatred or joy of victory, but a kind of calm indifference, as if Dominic no longer mattered to him. At that moment, Dominic truly understood the taste of failure. Not the pain of being defeated, but the shame of being forgotten. As the years passed, the face of the East End gradually changed. Old factories were converted into fashionable apartments, and boutique coffee shops appeared next to traditional pubs. Gideon's company became a small legend in the area, not only for its business success, but also for the employment opportunities it created for the community and the various social projects it supported. Occasionally, Gideon would encounter former acquaintances on the street, who were often surprised by his changes and achievements. Sometimes, he would hear snippets about Leandra. She had a stable job in Manchester, had a new social circle, and seemed to be doing well. But this information was to Gideon like hearing the story of a stranger, evoking neither anger nor nostalgia. On an autumn evening, Gideon stood on the balcony of his high-rise apartment, overlooking the city that had witnessed both his lowest point and his highest peak. He remembered that February night, that WhatsApp message that changed everything, and his decision to silently walk away. The pain of that moment had become a distant memory, but the change it brought was permanent. Gideon knew that sometimes life's heaviest blows would lead you down a path you never imagined. The scars of betrayal would never completely disappear, but he had learned to live with them and draw strength from them. He took a deep breath, feeling the coolness of the autumn breeze. Tomorrow, he would sign an important contract, expanding his company's business to the European continent. It was a new beginning, a future he once could not imagine. And all of this began with his decision to silently turn away rather than angrily confront. Sometimes, silence is not weakness, but the most profound strength. Sometimes, leaving is not escape, but the first step towards a broader sky. Under the changing sky of London's East End, Gideon finally found his own path, one paved by the pain of betrayal, yet leading to true inner peace. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more wonderful content. Looking forward to seeing you in our next story.